I'm seeing opportunities here to help folks and make a difference because suicide is not as rare as people think. Your mental health is just as important to us as your physical health. It wasn't about more money, more pay, more vacation time. It was about taking care of me and my family.
Hey everyone, this is Scott Peper with Mobilization Funding, and I'm excited to bring you another episode of the Real MF'ers today. Today's a special episode. I would like to call it even a special edition, and I'm joined by a real special guest. His name is Randy Thompson, who is the Vice President of Business Development at LivingWorks. And Randy today is going to talk to us more about mental health, specifically in construction, but also overall, and why it is so important. It's a problem. It's a critical thing for people to talk about, think about, and focus on. And most importantly, he's going to share some great stories with us and his own story. Randy, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so.
Scott, it's my pleasure. Anytime we can talk about mental health and suicide prevention, I'm quite eager to participate, so it is my pleasure to be here. My role here with LivingWorks, for those of you who might not know the organization, is we're a suicide prevention training company. I've been in the suicide prevention business for over 37 years. I've developed workshops that are globally delivered, so across the world, to help keep people safe from suicide. My background is in mental health, actually, as a social worker. I've worked mostly and primarily with organizations around mental health support, so building mental health and wellness programs for organizations. So it's a topic that's very near and dear to me. I shifted over into suicide prevention as I always felt there was a bit of a gap there when it came to mental health support. Most organizations and out there, and I think we should really focus on prevention and early intervention. But there's a piece there around suicide prevention that I think needs to be a part of that regular stream of support within organizations. And we focus, of course, in one industry in particular, and that is the construction industry, which we know well, Scott, has been impacted by suicide more than any other. So happy to talk about that today and the impact of suicide. And I think what organizations can do to kind of shift the culture a little bit around making mental health and suicide prevention okay to talk about, and know that these cultures haven't been built in a day, and it's going to take some time to shift it. But as we look at some of the statistics, I think we have a need, and we certainly, there is a need out there for us to take a stand. So I'm just excited to be here with you today and have this conversation, and hopefully we're able to help some folks.
I think we will. Matter of fact, I know we will. Randy, one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about first, or hoping you could touch on, is how did this become such a topic of passion for you? I mean, you're very well written. You speak all over about this. You're brought in as an expert, a leader, and you can tell that it's a lot more to you than just your job.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of mental health, been in the business, in the industry for over 30 years, and I've always just had, for whatever reason, a need to help. I used to think it was because I was really poor at math, so I should probably get into the people helping business, but I also realized that it is a passion of mine, and suicide in particular is important to me. I lost a brother and a very close friend of mine to suicide a number of years ago, and that really impacted me in a very significant way, a very personal way, and not in a way where I felt like, I probably should have saved him. And we can talk a little bit about, how folks who have lived with suicide can manage themselves, but just more around, there's got to be something we can do about this, because suicide is not as rare as people think. And when I started looking into the statistics around suicide, what I realized was there's there's a significant need there for support, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I spent my education in social work, and very little time did we spend around suicide prevention. So even those who you think are trained in helping people with suicide and dealing with their suicidal ideation and suicidal activities are not necessarily trained to deal specifically with that issue. So that became an issue for me, and LivingWorks just came calling one day. Well, I was working with family services at the time, and in the employee assistance program, and this opportunity came my way. I wasn't out looking for it, but it was certainly one that I felt deserved some time. And after we had a number of discussions, I felt like this was the right path for me at this point in my career. And I felt like I could do something about it, that I could maybe move the needle a little, because where there's passion, there's action. And that's really what drove me into suicide prevention. And I've been here now for almost 2 years, and I'm seeing progress. And I'm seeing opportunities here to help folks and make a difference. And it starts small, and it builds out into your communities. And we could talk a little bit, Scott, about what that could look like.
So diving straight into construction, as you know, our audience is a big construction audience. We focus a lot on construction as well. We try continuously to provide value in any possible way we can to the construction leadership teams, our clients, people we know, people we don't know, and anyone out there. And because construction, and you mentioned, is the number one industry that is prone or more prone to suicide, can you touch on why that is, and what are some things I'm hoping we can pull from this, are some things that are really leaders in this industry not only can do for themselves, because I'm sure some of the leadership is the people that are actually having some of these problems, but also noticing that amongst their teams to help create an environment that's safe for them to speak up when they're there.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there are a number of reasons why the construction industry have the numbers that they do. And so when we look at statistics and what you'll read, and I think the latest report is construction's identified as number 2. It's the number 2 industry, but the number 1 industry is mining and extraction. And as far as I'm concerned, to me, those are two such similar industries that we can't ignore the fact that they're so related. And to me, both need the attention around suicide prevention. So I kind of cluster that mining and extraction in with construction, very similar industries. When you look at the complexity of those industries, you can understand why they're at risk for suicide. They have challenging job types within that industry, anywhere from general labor then to skilled tradesmen. You've got management. You've got such a wide variety of different types. And there's over 11.5 million construction workers in the U.S. alone. So the numbers itself are quite large. When you think about the working conditions that a typical construction worker has to work with, you can find that challenging as well, just from a weather perspective. When you look at injuries and chronic back pain and that type of thing within that industry is quite prevalent. And often when you can't work, you don't get paid. So you're looking at financial issues that can drive mental health within that industry. Seasonal and temporary work is very common in the construction industry. So you often don't know from one project to the next if you're actually going to be able to work and bring home the finances. There's a lot of cases of isolation where fathers are away from their families for a period of time, away from their support network. So really reliant on the folks that they actually work with to complete that project. So that separation from family can cause issues. And despite the fact that we hear from other sectors, when it comes to the construction industry, mental health cases are the least reported reason for people to be off. So these workers are coming in saying that they're either not feeling well, or they have back pain, or they have other physical conditions. They're not actually relaying the fact that they're having mental health problems for fear of bullying, for fear of perhaps losing their job from some type of retribution, that they can be easily replaced. So even though they're reporting absences, they're not reporting the right ones. They're reporting other issues that they might be dealing with, but really at the end of the day, the focus should be on their mental health. So they're not always getting the right help they need. So there's just a huge number of factors that can impact an individual's mental health, particularly in the construction industry, that can drive to suicidal ideation and suicidal activity, because for whatever reason, they just can't get past the issues that they're trying to cope with.
It's interesting you bring those points up. I want this to be very actionable for the leaders that are listening to this. So
Sure.
if we're speaking directly to the construction leadership team or owners of the business, and they get nothing else from this video, what is one thing they can do to help make this better? It doesn't have to solve the problem. We don't have to I think too often in any problem, we all try to go A to Z too fast, but if they just make one step,
Yes, absolutely. And it's not an easy one. And there's many organizations that often just refute the fact that they may have mental health issues, drug and alcohol issues within their organization. There's a number of reasons for that. But when you think about it, I always tell organizations, because they come to me and say, well, what can we do, right? Like you've got all these wellness programs and EAPs, and there's so much out there. Where do I start is often the question I get. And I always tell them, start small. This culture that has been built for so long didn't happen overnight. And it's really a culture shift. And most organizations are doing something, whether it's an EAP or most organizations are trying something to help their employees, but are really focused on the right things. So before you decide to get into any type of wellness programs, really think about what are you trying to achieve? Like, what do you want to accomplish? Do you want to build a culture of mental health? Do you want to build a culture of wellness within the organization? What are some of the objectives that you want to achieve before you even start? Best thing you can do is look at building a committee to get that thing going, right? Build an action plan around some of the objectives that you've talked about and put a committee together to start investigating, 1, what you're already doing, 2, what's working and what isn't, 3, do a needs assessment around it. Solicit your staff, your employees. Ask them what's working, what isn't, what do they need. But recent studies, when they asked about, if you could have anything, right up to raises, more money, vacation time, what's the one thing that you would look for in your employer? And for the most part, like I don't have the numbers in front of me, Scott, it's about 70% of those that were surveyed said mental health support in the organization. I want my employer to be able to provide support for me and my family so I can stay focused at work. It wasn't about more money, more pay, more vacation time. It was about taking care of me and my family.
I was watching a podcast of someone I watch often. They had a guest on, and I can't recall the guest's name offhand. But, a similar question was asked, and the response was, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this, if there was one thing they could do, it would be to hold a meeting with your entire team, bring everybody together, and just tell them all that this is a safe place for mental health to talk about, that any problems you may have, you can always come into the door and talk about it. But they said, just having that one meeting with everyone and tell everybody, you know what, mental health is important to me as your leader. I have had issues where I'm not as happy as I could be or I'm not before. And I need you all to know that if you ever do feel that way, you can always come talk to me. There's no judgment at all. It's not going to be a place that we're ever going to tolerate that type of judgment. No one's brought the issue up, but it's here and I want you guys to know. Yeah. And they said that you can fully expect not a single word to be mentioned in that meeting and no one to say anything. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you had that meeting and you offered up anybody to talk and they know will make a huge impact. And I'm just curious if you would agree with that or anything you would add.
Absolutely. One of the first steps in you talking about shifting that culture, and that's probably why you don't get much feedback from a comment like that, because it kind of catches people off guard. But the number one, I think the key to a successful wellness program or a successful culture shift is really getting that buy-in from the top, that they have to hear from leadership that this is important to us. Your mental health is just as important to us as your physical health. You do a lot of training with, protective equipment and gear to keep you physically healthy. We are now focused on your mental health, and it's important to us. And from here on in, expect to hear a lot more from us. We're going to look to engage you in this process. It's not going to be us telling you what to do. We want you to be a part of it. It's super important to have your input, and we can build a small committee around this and agree on some objectives, and then come up with some recommendations on what do we need to do to make this environment safe for you to talk about mental health, safe for you to talk about suicide prevention, but more importantly, that we have the right resources available to you in a way that you can access it in a confidential manner, in a way that doesn't put your position or your role at risk, and one that will help you get back to full productivity. And that, Scott, is such a critical component and a great way to start off that kind of culture shift. And then as you work together, as that committee does work together, really look at what are the driving issues within the organization. Are there mental health issues specifically that drives that organization? Take a look at your drug costs. Take a look at your HR systems in terms of absence data. Take a look at what you're seeing. Are your managers trained at identifying someone who might need help? And what are they looking for? There are many ways that you can build around that to start creating, before you even start creating programs, is really creating what is the need here, and are we engaging the right people in this process to help build these programs? And I'm not talking about a full, you got some organizations, they talk about their wellness program. That didn't happen overnight. They started with something small. They started with like a nutrition program because they were looking at their drug data and their cholesterol was through the roof. So they started small, and that to me is the right thing to do. And they just kept building on it. They kept reviewing, is this program working? Is it successful? Right? They keep going back to that review. And if it is, and it's the right thing to do, then let's build on that because we've had some success. So there is a structure and a strategy to it. But I always tell organizations, it doesn't have to be difficult. Start small, engage your people, identify what your risk factors are. It's not hard. Data is there for you. Get the right people to work on it. You've got HR systems if you do. If not, there's HR support available out there as well. But you've got most of the data to help you get started. So start small, bring in some people who've got the experience to help kind of get you going, but eventually you will own it because you need to, and then you'll be able to kind of build on that as you go. And before you know it, you're going to have a much more engaged workforce. Mental health and suicide prevention will not be such a taboo. There won't be such stigma attached to it. People will be talking about it freely at the fountain like they talk about Sunday's football game. And that's really what you want to build, is that type of safety, that type of culture.
You say safety, and you mentioned that so many times. It really should be part of a safety program that's already probably in place.
100%.
Why not? Safety is so key on a job site, on a work site, to your insurance, to your people, to your team, to their family. Maybe incorporating that into your safety program is probably a great way to do it. And I guess I'm talking directly to all our audience right now. Make it part of your safety program. And then it doesn't have to be as in your face or new, so to speak. It's just part of a program that's already there. I would strongly recommend having that meeting. Based on what Randy just said and what I heard before, I think just hearing from the top that it's okay and it's a topic that's on your mind is going to have a lot bigger impact than one might think it does.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You'd be amazed. And it's just, it's like we're now on notice that this is okay. And that, and it's exciting to hear something like that, right? Yeah. And something that they're going to participate in and engage in. They're going to be a part of it. And you can do that where there's joint committees as well, where there's unions involved. I'm a big fan of bringing in joint committees and having them work together. And when we talk about mental health and suicide prevention, what a great cause for both those organizations, both those departments to work together. So there's great opportunity there. We're actually working with some of the larger construction organizations, and I didn't mention earlier, I'm a proud board of trustee member with the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. And LivingWorks, we just developed kind of a 1-hour lunch and learn, we call it, and it's kind of like an introduction to suicide prevention. We're kind of building awareness around suicide prevention. So it's kind of at that beginning phase for organizations who really have very little. And the message is, let's look at embedding this as part of your onboarding process. Let's make this a part of the person's first or second day. As much as you onboard around health and safety and introductions, let's make suicide prevention and mental health part of that onboarding process, so that new employee gets a sense right off the bat that, you know what, mental health is important to this organization, just as it is our physical health. So we're trying to push the needle a little bit in that direction and make it right at the very forefront of a person's career or within that organization, so that it just becomes part of their culture.
What is a good program, or even the start of a program cost? Is there a cost to it? Is it really part of what cost its structure that's already there, and it's just creating awareness and okay around it?
Well, that's a great question, and often that's what prevents businesses from actually jumping into these types, because they feel like, I don't understand the cost. Is there a cost? Where do I start? But there's a lot of things organizations can do at no cost, and it's just around the messaging that you can have around your sites around mental health. There's organizations like CISP where there's resources available. Your employee assistance program comes at a cost, which is quite minimal when you look into it. So there is a certain cost to most programs, but what's important, Scott, is what is the return on investment you should expect in those programs? When you look at a health and wellness program, you look at a smoking cessation program, et cetera, 97% of organizations today have an EAP, and within many of those EAPs are these types of programs, and folks that have the background and expertise to help them develop these types of structured programs, so that the cost can be quite minimal. But it is a targeted program that should have an ROI attached to it. And at the end of the day, these are issues that are driving costs within the organization already. So take a look at that in terms of what is this issue actually costing us? And then what can we do to mitigate it, so that at the end of the day, we're not only achieving a return on investment, but we're actually engaging our staff and our employees, and they're seeing us as an organization that cares about them. So there are varying degrees of cost, Scott, I'm not going to lie, but it doesn't have to cost anything to start shifting culture. It's just in the messaging. It's just in how you might be training your staff and your managers and supervisors on being able to identify someone who might need help and just having a conversation. So I would say start small. You don't have to get into these huge programs. Start small and build from there.
So one of the things I've heard from others is, my company is not that big yet. I don't need a wellness program, or I only have, 3 people in the office and 2 of them are in and out. What is the right size organization? Is one too small? Is one too large to have a wellness program and talk about mental health? Yeah,
you're never too small, to be honest. And then that's very real. I've worked with organizations with 10 employees. What I always think about is the smaller you are, the bigger the impact is going to be. Because in most cases, smaller organizations don't have the resources available to them to be able to support someone in need. And that person, while not being treated, their loss of productivity is hugely impacting the organization. So often in many cases, it's more important for them to have the support and resources that are available to their staff, so that they can help resolve them and get them back to work and get them back to being productive. Large organizations can withstand a bit more because of their size and because of their resources. But to me, I always, near and dear to my heart, is that national small business division, because they're the ones that are mostly impacted by mental health, and they're the ones that need the support the most. So I would say that it's just as important for smaller organizations to think about mental health as it is for large ones.
I personally think even if you are in a very, very large organization, your best method for being able to really communicate this and make an impact is to break it into small groups anyway. So if you are a small business, doing it earlier and often is even better, because then you're going to create that culture that as you grow and scale and organize your business, it's going to be part of the normal internal guidance that new employees, new team members, new leaders come into the organization with and can notice and accept and feel right away. So I think I would agree with you. I think the smaller the better. And if you're too big, if you're already big, I think you need to figure out how to make it small. Have one big conversation, but figure out how to get it into small groups as fast as possible.
100%. I'm a big fan of pilot projects in a very structured manner. And large organizations, if you're going to throw this program out to everyone, it becomes so unwieldy, tough to manage, tough to monitor. You're absolutely right, Scott. Start small focus group, test it out, reevaluate, see what's working, see what isn't, make the changes you need in those small groups. And then once you got it right, then it's time to kind of scale it out to other departments. Again, keeping it small, just kind of building from there. You start off with everyone all on the same page. It's tough to manage. So it's a great point, and one that I often recommend to organizations. Start small. Doesn't have to be daunting, right? You'll talk yourself out of it. So
where can someone watching this go get some information, access to information, free information, ways to educate themselves, learn? Is there a book you'd recommend? Is there a website they can go to? Obviously, your organization is key. What's on your website? Is there others? Where should they go? I want this to be, an actionable part of this series that we're doing. Is I really want people to be able to watch it, be moved, but know where to go next.
Absolutely. And there are a number of resources available, both online and through text, believe it or not. I often recommend organizations, particularly around mental health. I know I talked a bit about employee assistance programs, and that is kind of my background, but I believe that many of them are underutilized, and they often know more about the organization than anyone else, particularly around mental health. So I would definitely want to leverage your EAP a lot more. When it comes to suicide prevention, of course, the CIASP is a great resource for any construction company, particularly within the U.S. And you can access support through CISP through their website, which is preventconstructionsuicide.com. So that's the CISP website. There is a challenge out there to all construction industries called Stand Up, where we're asking construction companies to take a pledge to stand up to suicide prevention. And there's actually free training or training that are available at a rebate through the CISP for these construction organizations. So that makes it affordable for everyone. And it's just like I talked about earlier about creating awareness. There's a 90-minute online training called START that we developed at LivingWorks and launched about a year ago, where people can learn, how to support someone who might be in need of some suicide prevention support. How to identify someone who may be in need and be able to approach them, have a conversation, and be able to link them to someone who might have a little deeper awareness, a little deeper expertise in suicide prevention. But it's a great place to start, right? Because we're all built, and everything we do is built for helpers. So this is an opportunity, if you want to be a helper, to actually access that type of support. Our own website, of course, livingworks.net, has a number of resources available for folks who want to be a helper. Mates in Construction is a very, very well-developed organization out of Australia, where they developed a program where the employees themselves own it, essentially. They run it, they manage it. Mates provides the resources that are necessary and the training that are necessary for these individuals. But Mates in Construction is really a kind of self-owned suicide prevention program that's showing great success. You can find them at mates.org.au. And again, just lots of research and data available for folks that are looking for it. As we near November, we also are nearing Movember, which is a site that's geared more towards men and getting support for mental health for men. So that's coming up in a few weeks. And we're excited to be working with Movember as well as part of their suicide prevention initiatives. So Movember.com is another resource for men, where 93% of the construction industry is male dominated. So I think that's a good one. Then there's national support. So the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is always available 24/7 to people through suicidepreventionlifeline.org. or the 1-800 number, 1-800-SUICIDE. There's also, sorry, Scott, I know, there's lots available.
That's great to know. You know what? And the fact that there's that many resources out there, should tell everybody something. We'll put up what information we can on our resources page. We'll make sure that there's obviously links here associated to this video where everyone can access your information. They can easily find you, find your website, your organization, and get information that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. You can even text 741-741 and someone will respond. Some people, so younger people, want to use different modalities to get support. You don't have to make a call or you don't have to surf a website. You can actually get text-based support as well.
Well, Randy, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for our group, for me, for us, our organization, and all of our listeners and customers and potential customers out there. I really think it's an important topic. It's something that we certainly are important to us here, and I know it's important to everyone else. And it is anything, man, if we could just have impacted even one person today, then it's certainly worth our time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's a lot of information at one time. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or if people want to contact me via email, if I could share that, just to have a conversation around where do I start, or what's available. I'm more than happy to respond.
We'll include your email, and if you want your phone number as well, please feel free to reach out to Randy. Randy, you're very gracious with your time, and I really appreciate you sharing your email and number and be willing to talk to folks. That means a lot to us. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll get more to that. Just kind of putting it out there today. And you said if we helped a few people, great. But by all means, feel free to reach out. It's not easy to do, but once you do, you'll be glad you did.
And we'll leave it at that. I don't think I could finish in a better way. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Randy, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your insights and thoughts. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it. Folks, if you do nothing else, have that meeting. Let people know that you care. Let people know it's on your mind. Have a great day and a great week, and keep it going. Take care.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. Reviews help more people find the show. If you'd like to learn more about mobilization funding, visit us at mobilizationfunding.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.